ladies and gentlemen, the Tiny DevOps Guy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tiny DevOps, where we talk about DevOps for small teams, tiny teams, 1 to 20 developers, something like that. Today, I'm excited to have Charles Wood with me today, or Chuck, as he goes by sometimes. Chuck, thanks for coming on. Some of you guys may know him. Some of you listeners may know him as one of the co-hosts or the principal host, really, of the Adventures in DevOps podcast. He also runs several other podcasts, which I think we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But before we do all that, Chuck, would you give us a brief introduction? Tell us about your career, what you know about DevOps, and why we should care about what you had to say.
Oh, where do I start? So, I started programming a TI-85 calculator in junior high. If you're not in the U.S. or don't know what junior high is, I was like 12 or 13. I was also really into math at the time, and so we learned a little bit of Pascal, just to make mathematical thingies, draw pictures. So I kind of got into that, got into electronics in high school, went to Brigham Young University. I worked in the Office of Information Technology is what they called it. And I specifically worked in the operations center. So that's how I got into DevOps, or into operations anyway. I was working janitorial services, met a girl. She introduced me to her friends. Later became roommates with those friends, and they were working in the ops center. So that's how I got in there. Never really dated the girl. Anyway, it's another story.
It sounded like happily ever after there, but I guess that happened later.
Nope, not quite.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, so I worked there for 4 or 5 years. I did a brief internship looking at maybe going into law. That didn't work out. Went back. I worked on the server provisioning team. And so initially we'd go in and we'd put the CDs in the servers in the back room of the operations center. And then they figured out how to pixie boot. So, it would load the media off of another server on the network. And then eventually we got into VMware, ESX at the time. And, which was kind of a precursor to some of the provisioning we do now, where it's like, take that image and put it over there. And all of our servers had fun names at the time. Oh, yes. That's something I kind of miss because now all my servers this is the website that's on this server. But anyway, that's kind of how I got in. I picked up programming at the time as well. I had a friend that was building e-commerce sites in LampStack. So I started doing that and, majored in computer engineering, which was more hardware focused. But yeah, eventually I got into software. I was actually running a support team for the company I was working for, and we needed a support portal. And I went to the CEO, and the CEO looked at me and said, "We're not paying for that." And so we built it. So built a support portal. Okay. That's how I really got into it, just because ops kind of made sense to me. It was fun. It was interesting. But that's how I got into dev was that project. And it was like, oh, wow, this stuff's actually useful. So anyway, that I've been doing Ruby on Rails since then. It's been 15 years. I got into podcasting at that same job. I had a coworker that bought an iPod. He helped me get set up listening to podcasts on the Mac Mini I was using to run the Mac beta for the product that we worked on. And yeah, so at the same time I was getting into programming, I was also getting into podcasting. Started my first show, Rails Coach, which is not out there anymore. I morphed it into Teach Me to Code podcast when I took over the Teach Me to Code screencast series. And then I'd been doing that for several years, 3 years, I think. And a friend of mine posted on Twitter that, hey, we ought to have a podcast called Ruby Rogues, where we have a panel that talks about Ruby. And I had been listening to panel shows as well because I was way into podcasting, and sounded like a great idea to me. So we started it up, and that's how the rest of these started. So we started Ruby Rogues and the JavaScript Jabber Freelancer Show, iFreaks, Adventures in Angular, I had a bunch of people coming to me wanting React and Elixir podcasts. So we started those. I started a Vue podcast at the same time. And then I started Adventures in DevOps, Adventures in Blockchain, I think, which is no longer running, and a few other shows that we have out there. So
Okay.
that's kind of the history of where this has all gone. And yeah, it was my full-time thing up until the fall of last year. And then I took a job at Morgan Stanley, worked there for about a year, and now I'm working a contract and building up top-end devs.
Cool. So let's talk about that, top-end devs. That's what I'd like to talk to you about today. What is a top-end dev? So that's, of course, that's your brand.
Right.
We'll talk about that. But what is the concept? What is a top-end dev to you?
Well, it's interesting because the two were kind of connected in my head. So I went through some internet stuff. Welcome to the internet. People suck sometimes. Most people don't, but it's just the way it goes. Anyway, it really made me think, what do I want, right? What do I really want to do? And I realized that I wanted to help people become top-end devs. And when I think about it, I kind of have two definitions. One of them is a real short definition, and that's you're within the top 5% of your field, top-end dev, right? That's easy. But what does that actually look like, right? Practically, how do we help people, get to that level? I mean, who are these people, right? And so some of them are kind of easy to identify, right? They're sort of the celebrities in the space, for lack of a better term, right? So you've got people that are kind of out there that either have, made major contributions to open source that everybody uses, and so everybody knows who they are, or they're the people that are speaking at all of the conferences on a particular topic, or, a lot of times they're the podcasters that are podcasting about it. They're the people that have the YouTube channels about it. But again, practically for the everyday developer, it's like, okay, well, how do I get there, right? And is that all of the top end developers or DevOps folks? And I think the answer to that is no, right? It's not the top 5%. That's like the top 0.5%, right? So maybe I'll have the tippy top end devs or something, I don't know. But for the rest of it, the rest of the 5%, who are they? And when I really think about that, I think about, okay, who were just the killer people that I worked with that were just amazing coworkers, right? And typically they're the people that have sort of an encyclopedic knowledge of whatever the topic is, right? So it's hey, well, what do we use here? And it's like, well, I have played with X, Y, and Z. And you're looking at them going, now you have the same job I have, and you have had that for a while, and you don't, we haven't done that here. So, or it's the person that will sit down and pair program with you or whatever, right? And so you're sitting there and you get stuck, and they're the ones that will help you find the answer. They're the people that, so there's some soft skills element to this too, right? Where, they contribute to the team, they push the team forward, they help with the practices and things like that. But they're also experts, right? And so it's a bit of both. And that's where I really put things is, it's people effectively who are experts in whatever technology space they're in. They consistently push the team forward, and they are actively participating in the wider community. Those are your 5%. And I promise you, you're probably thinking, well, I know a lot of people that do that. You really don't. You really don't. There are not a lot of people that are doing all three.
I mean, if you're talking 5%, that means 1 out of 20, right?
1 out of 20. Yep.
So, think of the last time you went to a meetup or maybe a lunch break, and if you can remember far enough back that you were actually at a lunch break with physical colleagues, and go around the table and think, count 20, and how many of those match that description? I'll bet it's one or fewer in most cases.
Yep. And the reality is that of those people that are sitting at the table, most of them probably fall within the top 15 to 20%, because they're already actively participating.
Yeah, I think it was Bob Martin who made the point in a video presentation he did several years ago that since essentially the beginning of time, which isn't that long ago in computer terms, but since the beginning of computer time, so basically Alan Turing onward, the number of developers has roughly doubled every 5 years.
Yep.
And will continue to do so for a while. It won't forever, because eventually you would have more developers than there are humans on the planet, and that won't happen. I expect won't happen unless we count AI.
Well, and that's interesting too, because I talk to a lot of these people coming in, and boy, are they hungry to come in and nail this stuff. But the other thing that's interesting about it is that when they come in and they learn stuff, most of the time, are learning the new stuff, right? They're not learning the old crufty stuff that we're doing every day. And so, that's the other element to this is these people are keeping up on the new stuff, like the top 5%. They're staying current, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're doing and where they're headed with this.
Should everybody try to be a top 5%? Obviously, that's not possible. For there to be a top 5%, there also has to be a bottom 95%. But should it be a goal of everybody to reach this, or is it something that it's okay if you don't want to be one of those people?
So I'm kind of torn on this, right? Because everybody wants something different from their career. If you're ambitious, then absolutely, right? But yeah, the reality is also that if you're doing the things that I recommend people doing, and I have 6. I just added one this morning. I was talking to my neighbor, and I was like, I missed this. I'll tell you what it is. You'll be the first to hear it.
Right.
But if you do these 6 things on a regular basis, and it's really not a ton of stuff to do every day or every week, or, because some of them are daily and some are weekly. If you're doing these things, you're doing more than 95% of everybody, right? And so even if you're brand new, if your expertise doesn't put you in the top 5%, these practices will, right? Okay. And so that's the other thing too, is that in a lot of cases, I have people come to me all the time. How do I stay current? How do I stay current? And the reality is you don't have good inputs, right? You don't have good inputs coming in and telling you what you need to do next. And that's why you're worried about this, right? And you see new people coming in and learning the new technology, and they kind of have this intuitive grasp of it, and you realize, hey, I may wind up just stuck where I'm at, or I don't know what to learn next, and so I may wind up stuck where I'm at. And the reality is that these practices will get you out of that and give you good input so that you know what to go learn. And that'll put you in the top 5%, and it'll put you there pretty darn fast, even if you're newer in the field, because 95% of the people that have the expertise aren't doing these things.
What would you say to somebody who says, I want to be a top 5%er, but I really don't like the public speaking. I don't want to blog. I don't want to do podcasting and YouTube. And, I don't care about that aspect of stuff, but I want to be the best developer I can be, and so on. Are those contradicting goals from somebody? Because I hear that kind of thing frequently, but does that mean they're not going to be top 5%? Are they stuck in the top 15 or something?
No, it means they're not confident enough to go put out content.
Okay.
I don't want to say never, but it's almost never the case that they don't want to do that. They're afraid they're going to fail at it. They're afraid they're not going to be good at it. And it's an excuse. And one of the things that I tell people to do is produce content every week. Okay. So, and I've heard that before, right? I've had people come to me and say, hey, I just, I don't even know what I would blog about, or I don't know what I would podcast about, or I don't know what I would write about. I don't know what I would YouTube about. I don't feel confident talking on camera. I don't feel confident using the mic. That's fine. And some of that's normal, but the reality is you're not doing it for anybody else. So why worry about anybody else? The reality is it's a practice that does a couple of things for you that are really, really important. And so you need to be doing it, right? One of them is that you actually think about the content that you're putting out, and that causes you to think about what you're learning and what you're sharing. And it forces you to organize your thoughts around a topic. The other thing is that I can't tell you. I mean, I've been podcasting long enough that I don't remember having a career where I didn't get hired because of my content. Okay. So I realize that may be different from other people's experience, but the reality is if they can go and they can see your expertise on a long run blog or a long run podcast or a long run YouTube series, even if it's not popular, you get so much mileage out of that. The other thing is you really start to figure out, where you fit within whatever communities you do interact with. And that is an extremely powerful place to be, because when you show up, you immediately know, nope, I don't want to be over there. I want to be over here, right? And you also start to identify with other people within the community who you have things in common with. And you also know when you don't have something in common with somebody, how to talk about it.
I can completely identify with that and confirm that it's been my experience as well. That long before I was doing a podcast or YouTube or anything like that, I had a blog, and I would just post occasionally when I had something interesting or notes to my future self about here's how I did this thing. And every time I would interview for a job, of course, the interviewers would read that blog. They were probably the only people on the planet who ever read that blog, aside from myself. But it was valuable to them. Writing a blog post.
Yep.
You don't know, you're not going to get a million views, but those 3 views from those people who are going to interview you in the future are worth a lot.
Yep. If you're trying to attract business, by the way, if you're a freelancer or consultant, you have to be doing this.
Yeah.
The other thing that I left off is that it makes you get disciplined, right? Doing it every week, because sometimes it's like, I had a bunch of stuff go down. Like this week, in my world, right? My virtual assistant that posts the podcast episodes and things like that, stuff that I haven't thought about in months, because she just handles it, right? Her city got hit by a typhoon, and she still doesn't have electricity or internet, right? So guess who's doing it? It's me, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm still making it a priority. And I think that's just as important as just having the discipline to say, no, I committed to doing this on a regular basis, this regular basis. And so I'm going to do it, right? Now, this week it might be, hey, I was working on this thing and I got this weird error and this is how I fixed it. Here's 2 paragraphs. But you posted, right? And, anyway, it's really, really critical to be able to do that, because then you have that habit.
Yeah, I agree. I've been doing daily blogging for almost a year now, and it's amazing how frequently I can just refer to something I wrote. Some conversation on social media or with a friend over beers happens, and we're like, yeah, I wrote about that. Here's the link. And it's just, it's fun to do that. I don't know how powerful it is powerful, but it's just fun to say, yeah, I did that. Here's the link, and done. Like I don't have to spend an hour explaining myself anymore. Just here.
Yep, absolutely.
So you talk about doing weekly blogging, I guess, right? Is that kind of your
blogging, podcasting?
Starting?
I mean, podcasting's my deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm on several podcasts, so I have more than one bit of content that goes out. But whatever you're comfortable with, right? Blogging's probably the lowest barrier to entry. Mm-hmm. But my son, for example, he wants to be YouTube famous, and so YouTube's probably his deal, right? He's 16. He wants to play video games on YouTube. But it kind of depends. Some people like being on the camera, and some people don't.
Yeah.
Some people like talking and aren't comfortable with being on the camera. Also, great. It's natural to me to just talk my thoughts out. So
right. So if somebody comes to you, they're new to this idea, and they're like, "What should I do?" It sounds like your advice is, if all else is equal, just start writing a blog and do something. Get a blog out there. Yeah. You can always add a podcast in the future if you want to, or whatever else.
Yeah, because a blog, there are blogging platforms that you don't even have to set up. You just sign up for them. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to mention one of the more popular ones because I hate Medium. But there are other platforms out there. You can set up a WordPress. There are static site generators that are real easy to get rolling. But yeah, just start writing. It doesn't have to be pretty.
LinkedIn even gives you the option to put long form content if you want to create lists on LinkedIn. Not that it's the best interface, but that's not a concern right now, right?
Yeah, but the other thing is it's not indexed the same way. You want something that's Googleable.
Yeah.
But yeah. Just to put it out there, the other things that I tell people to do, number one is you have to learn something new every day, right? Now I have some guidelines for this, like, one thing should be for your future job, where you want to end up. So 1 day a week should be that. 1 day a week should be some kind of soft skills or the way you interact with people on your team. The other 5 days can be whatever you want, right? And if you're not following the exact guideline, but you're learning something new every day, you're doing great, right? You need to commit code every day. Okay. Is number 2. Number 3 is you have to meet somebody new in the industry every week. Okay. Now, if you have a podcast or a YouTube channel or something like that gets a lot easier, right? Because you just reach out to them and say, hey, you want to be on my show? Right? and then you get to talk to them and you have that kind of conversation. But
How would you have responded, Chuck, if I had called you a year ago before we did podcasting together, and I said, would you have an hour-long conversation with me? I mean, maybe you would say yes, but most people wouldn't, right? You would have?
You'd be surprised, especially if you have a podcast audience. I mean, I've seen people with brand new podcasts that legit, like, it's like, well, people don't even know about it yet, so it's got like 5 people listening to it.
Yeah.
And I've seen big names go on them.
Yeah.
So you would be surprised. But the thing is there's a lot to be said for talking to your peers, talking to people that are maybe just a little ahead of you one way or the other, maybe a little behind you one way or the other, where you provide mentorship. All of that's valuable content. So, it doesn't have to be somebody that you're going, oh, well, that guy has thousands of podcast listeners, I'd love to get him on. Go for it, right? But the flip side of that is that you can get other people that you can create great content for that don't have name recognition, and that's just as valuable content.
Yep. Sorry, I interrupted your list. You were going.
No, you're all good. So learn something new every day. Commit code every day. Meet somebody new every day. We talked about one piece of content every day. The one that I just added, talking to my neighbor, because we were chatting, and I realized, people need to, and so I have 2 daily, 2 weekly. This one's a monthly. You have to participate in some kind of community event every month. Okay. Now, that can be going to lunch with your colleagues. It could be going to a meetup. It could be, anything like that. But it's somewhere where you're actually going and interacting with and talking to people about what you do.
Nice.
And then I added, in relation to that, at least once every 6 months, it has to be some kind of conference. It can be a summit, right? I get that some people can't travel for whatever reason, within or outside of the pandemic, but you've got to go and you've got to interact with people while you're there. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you're going to get kind of the latest and greatest from the experts that are speaking, and you're going so that you can meet people in that kind of a setting, because it's just different. There's just something different about it. And then the last thing is you have to sit down every 3 months and you have to look at your long-term goals. So that's, a year to 3 years out, and decide where you want to head, right? And then decide what you're going to do over the next 3 months, so that you know what you're learning, who you're meeting, so that you can get all those other things to line up with where you want to go. And I have a lot of people go, well, Chuck, I'm not sure where I want to be in 3 to 5 years. And my answer is, well, pick something that sounds good. You can always change it later. And what you're going to find out is over the next, 2 to 3 months during that period, where you're learning what you were learning to get where you want to go, you're going to say, oh, well, I thought I wanted to be in management, and so I've been picking up management skills every week for my future job skill. That stuff is boring. I hate it. I do not want to be a manager. I don't want to be anywhere close to a manager, right? I want to hire somebody to be my manager so that I don't have to do it, right? And so the reality is then you go back, and then when you do your next three months planning, you nix manager and you say, you know what? I want to be a freelancer. And so, and then maybe you start picking up skills for freelancing, and you're going, some of the things that I have to do to market myself as freelancer is super fun. Or you may figure out that's not it either, and you just want to be, kind of the top end dev expert guy on your team. And that's fine too. But then you have to be real concrete about what that means so that you know what you're learning over the next 3 months.
One thing, or a couple things that I noticed you didn't mention, and I'm curious where you think, if and where you think these fit in your framework. Reading books. That's something I always, I read a lot, and the people that I would consider top end devs usually read a lot. They've read books by Bob Martin and Martin Fowler and Kent Beck and all the big names. You didn't mention reading. You did mention learning. Is that where you feel that fits, or?
Yes, absolutely. So, top end devs, I'm getting ready to launch the book club. We're going to be reading Bob Martin and Martin Fowler and all these guys. But the other thing is that, if you read a chapter of a book, if you read a few paragraphs of a book and you feel like you really learned something, right? It just inspired you to think about, whatever. That's enough, right? I mean, I'm not setting the bar so high. It's not like you have to learn Kubernetes today and, no, it's one thing, right? It's like, oh, I learned that I can configure Kubernetes to act this way with these couple of flags. Great, right? Now go do something with it. But you learned it, right? The committing the code is doing something with it, right? That's the plan. And when I say commit code, it's not at work, right? The stuff you do for work doesn't count. It has to be outside of work. It has to be stuff that you're not doing for work. Now, if you're an entrepreneur and you have a side project and that side project may eventually fold back into your business, that's fine, right? Because, but you're doing it to learn. You're not doing it to, oh, well, I committed code today because I showed up at work.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so books fit into that. I'm a huge fan of books. I mean, honestly, on the entrepreneurial end and things like that, I mean, I consume probably 3 or 4 books a month. And then, yeah, I'd like to go pick up a tech book of some kind and consume one of those every month. But usually they don't come in audiobooks, so I actually have to plan out time to sit down and read. But, and I've been doing a challenge called 75 Hard, and part of that is actually reading 10 pages every day. And so I fit a lot of that in there, and so I can usually get through a decent-sized tech book in a couple weeks. But, yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing, right? So books fit into there. I'm a huge fan, like I said, but if you watch a 10-minute video on how to do a thing and you learn something, that's good, right? And that's what Top End Devs is supposed to be, is, the brand is, we're working on getting series that come out every week. And so it'll be, we'll have a Docker series and this series and a that series. So it's, okay, well, today I'm going to sit down and I'm going to learn something about Chef, right? And so I'm going to go watch the Chef video. And then tomorrow I'm going to go watch the Docker video. And you kind of get the idea, right? And then the day after that, I'm going to go read a chapter out of this book.
What do you think about speaking at conferences? How important is that to people on this track?
So it depends. And I mean, I think it's a healthy thing for people to do, but I understand that some people just aren't going to be good at it. And I also understand that a lot of people just aren't confident to go out and do it, right? I'm pretty fearless. I'm weird. And so I go do it. But I think a lot of that just comes out of, I've been podcasting for so long that if I'm going to say something stupid, I've probably already said it.
And it's recorded.
Yes. It's out there in the world. You can find it. But honestly, it's one of the best ways to really get recognized as an expert. I will also put out there that if you are looking to kind of get that top end dev job, right, where you want to kind of be the expert in the company, or you want to be recognized as, this, that, or the other, or maybe you're thinking you want to be a developer evangelist, right? So now we're starting to talk career tracks, right, which is that 3-month, sit down and say, this is where I want to be in 3 years, so this is what I've got to do in 3 months. Right. And so speaking might fit into that, where you're sitting there and you're going, you know what, I really do want to be recognized as an expert, but you don't have to do that to be top 5%. Right. So it fits, and especially if you want to be in that top 0.5%, but reality is that you don't have to. Right. And so if you're showing up at the conference and you're mentoring people and you're talking to people and you're learning things and you're making those connections, a lot of times you'll be able to talk to and get to know those speakers anyway and move in those circles. That gets you those better inputs that I was talking about earlier with staying current, because now you can have conversations with people who are involved, I guess, a little in a different way than you are. But yeah, it's not a critical piece to this. It's something I encourage, but it's not something that I think is required.
Mm-hmm. For people who are interested, they want to be a top 5% developer, but they just want a regular job. Maybe they want to work at Google, or they want to, whatever. They're not looking to be the next, I don't know, what's DHH or whatever,
right?
Big celebrity or whatever.
Right.
They just want to get paid well and enjoy their job and be respected. How important do you think it is for these types of people to build a so-called personal brand, as opposed to just learning everything and talking about it? Or is there even a distinction?
So I think there is a distinction. I don't know that it's a very meaningful one.
Okay.
Right. So I see people, and they just put content out. You can be more deliberate about putting content out, do a little bit more design work on your social media and on your blog or podcast or whatever, and and own a personal brand. Typically, the people who have strong personal brands are also people who have strong opinions and aren't afraid to put them out there. And so then you start moving more toward that celebrity status, right? And so there's a spectrum here. As far as the rest of it goes, though, I mean, if you just want to show up at a great company, do great work, and and enjoy the rest of your life, I mean, that sounds pretty nice to me, to be honest, right? I just want to take my kids to Disneyland every year or something, right? The reality is that you do need to do all this other stuff because you get hired on your personal brand, right? And so effectively, if you think about it, what winds up happening is so let's say you want to go work at Google, and I can't tell you how many people are like, I want to work at a FANG company, and I look at them and go, why? Yeah. But then I help them, right? But I don't ask them quite that way, because it is important to know why, right? Is it status? Is it something else? But in order to have that job, they hire you on your personal brand. So, when people are hiring junior developers and, they have a whole bunch of unknowns show up, right? The person that kind of shines the brightest wins, right? Is really the way that works, right? This is somebody I think I can work with. This is somebody I think I can train. This is somebody that I think, is hungry to get this stuff done. And how do I know that? Well, they have a blog. They've committed to GitHub every day. I mean, that's what this stuff is showing people, is that, hey, look, I'm the kind of person that you want to hire. And that's a personal brand. But it's not a personal brand in the way that we think of, like a DHH or some of these other folks. Or, some of the other ones that come to mind are like Wes Boss, right? He's created a personal brand, but he's done it around, he's trying to sell courses and things like that. And so it's important to his business, right? DHH does a lot of the same things, and I think it does bring business to Basecamp. But you don't have to go that way. If you want to go work at a great company, having all this stuff, under your belt, oh yeah, they've been blogging every day or blogging every week for 3 years. They obviously know what they're talking about, because I read some of the articles, and it's not this wimpy, here's yet another intro to Docker that I've written 8 times, right? It's, they're learning new stuff, and they're thinking about it, and they're sharing it. They show up at the community events. They're actually driven to learn. I mean, those are the people I'm going to hire every dang day, right? I was just talking to my neighbor over here, and he mentioned that he had one guy on his team, and he's a technical genius, and he just left my team, and boy, is that a relief, right? And the reality is because he has to push him to do anything to move forward. And so, some of those interpersonal skills, soft skills that you're going to pick up, once a week are going to be important. But the other end of it is when people when they hire somebody new, they kind of want to be able to see who they're going to bring in. And that doing all this stuff gives you that baseline. The other thing is having the connections. I mean, I can't tell you how many people they're like, well, I can't find a good job. And I'm like, how many people do you know? Right. And so all of these things play into that. And so even if you're just thinking, you know what, I don't need to be the celebrity. I don't even need to be, like well thought of at the company I work at. I just want to sit down and do my job. The reality is that all of these things are going to help you get a better job. They're going to put you in a better position to get the thing that you want to get. And then, I mean, honestly, I've seen companies hire people at insane salaries that have been in the industry 2 or 3 years. And the reason is because they've gone out and they put in the time to learn stuff that the guys that have been in 10 years won't go learn, won't go do, or at least 95% of them won't. And so, there's no reason why this can't just accelerate your career either, to the point where you're actually moving into the position you want. And so, if anything, a lot of people that, they just want to show up and do cool tech and, solve cool problems and feel like they're a part of something. And that is totally fine. But if you're going to do that, you may as well be the best you can at it and go put yourself in the best position you can.
What should you look for in a job to help you with this journey? I mean, you don't want to end up in a dead end job, but how do you know when that's how do you define that, and how do you know what to look for when you're on the job search?
So you remember how I said that 95% of people don't do these things? This fits right into that. Where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years, right? Because if you can figure that out, right, I want to be a CTO, or I want to, I want to be a technical lead of some kind, right? Not a manager necessarily, but a technical lead at a company where I'm, making some of the technology decisions and really relied upon. Or, I want to go surf, I want to live on the beach and surf. And so I just want a place that'll just pay me. I mean, whatever, right? Any of these are valid. I want to take my kids to Disneyland every year. I mean, whatever. I'm probably going to keep saying that one because I like it. But
do you take your kids to Disneyland every year?
I don't.
Is it an aspiration still, or it's just something you heard?
So no, this year, honestly, what I'm looking at is I want to take them each on an individual trip of some kind, right?
Oh,
so,
nice. Yeah.
I could go into all the details, but we haven't been to Galaxy's Edge. My 10-year-old is nuts about Star Wars, so Disneyland's kind of an easy win there. My 12-year-old is crazy about Harry Potter. Universal Studios is an easy win there. You can kind of get the idea, right?
Yeah.
But again, it's down to what do I want, right? What do I want? What's it going to take? So let's say take my kids to Disneyland every year. Well, I know that that's going to be an outlay of cash. And let's say that it's $15,000 for the whole trip, right? I mean, I have 5 kids, so that's a lot of people to take to Disneyland. But I live in Utah, so we can drive there, right? Anyway, it's a long drive. But anyway, so the point is that I can sit down and I can say, okay, well, right now let's say we're living on like $70,000 a year. And I don't know. I haven't done the budgeting, but, let's say $70,000 a year. So now I need to get to $85,000 a year, right? And maybe account for inflation. So let's make it an even $90,000 a year, okay? So what do I have to do to get there, right? And still like what I'm doing at my job, right? Mm-hmm. So then I can start to write down, okay, well, what are all the things that I want in a job? Well, I want a good boss, and it needs good benefits. I need this, I need this, I need this. And I want a $90,000 a year job. Well, I can go look and see job listings that are listing for $90,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And so I can backfill this, right? And then I can say, okay, well, if I'm making $70,000 a year now, by the way, if you've been there for more than a year or so, you might be able to get $90,000 a year, just saying. But let's say that, I can't seem to line something up, right? So what do I need to learn? Well, I can go look at those job listings. I can talk to people that work in those companies. I wrote a book on this, by the way. Make the connections. So those are the people that I want to meet every week, right? Or people that work at those companies that are working in those $90,000 a year jobs, right? And, and so then I can say, okay, well, do I qualify for the $80,000 a year job, right? Maybe that's the jump, or maybe I can get into that company as a junior technician or a mid-level technician, right? And then just let them know, hey, look, what I'd like to do is I'd like to prove to you that I'm worth $90,000 a year. So I'd like to come in at 80,000. If you tell them you want 90 and they tell you no, just say, look, well then let me come in at 80, and within a year, if I do these things, and so you start thinking, so what's the next step to that, right? So if I want to become a CTO, for example, and I'm an individual contributor, the next job for me is probably going to be some kind of management position, right? So, and it may not be mid-level, it may just be team lead, right? And so it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go talk to my boss. Hey, boss, my goal is in 5 years to be CTO of a company that I'm a part of. So, I feel like the next step is to have a job kind of like yours. What should I be learning in order to, go talk to other team leads, and you can figure it out, right? I mean, it's what job should I be looking for next really depends on where I want to end up. And the best way to figure out how to get that job is to talk to other people who have that job, or talk to their bosses. Because if you talk to their bosses are going to tell you what they want, right? Well, I had this really great team lead that worked under me, middle manager. And he did X, Y, and Z, A, B, C, he dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's here. And it's like, okay, well, then I need to learn how to do all that stuff, right? And so you can dedicate some of your learning to that, and then go start applying for those jobs. Because the other thing is once you start applying for those jobs, you start getting feedback. We hired somebody else. Okay, well, what 2 things can I, learn in the meantime so that the next job I apply to, I can be more qualified on. And a lot of people will tell you that if you get that specific. But you if you talk to people who are a couple steps ahead of you, they can tell you what you need, and then you can go learn it and learn something new every day that will get you there.
Chuck, well, you mentioned a book title or a book that you wrote. What's the title of that book for people who want to find it?
So I'm currently revising it. I'm going to retitle it. Right now, if you go on Amazon and you type in Max Coders, you'll find it. Max Coders was the brand that I settled on before Top End Devs. And so it's Max Coders Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job or something like that. But yeah, it's just going to be, Find Your Dream Developer Job, I think is what I'm going to wind up titling it. And yeah, it just walks you through, hey, here's how you update your resume. Here's how you contribute to, it tells you to commit often too, have a side project, how to get involved in the community, because those are the biggies. And then from there, how to leverage connections in order to find the job you want, and how to identify what companies offer what you want.
Mm-hmm. Really good.
So, yeah.
How can people get in touch with you?
So the best way to do it, if you go to topenddevs.com/tinydevops, I'll just put all the information there. I have a 2-week email course that I'm working on, that should be available when this goes live. And if you get in there, it'll just walk you through a lot of this stuff. I'm also on Twitter. I'm not that hard to find. But Top End Devs is kind of the best place to find a lot of that stuff. And then you can go listen to some of our other shows like Adventures in DevOps and, click my face and you get the info there too. But topenddevs.com/tinydevops is going to get you what you want. I'm also going to put out there that if you go there, it's also going to give you an opportunity to sign up for Top End Devs offering at half off. So
awesome.
Anyway, it'll give you both. It'll send you an email and tell you how to do it. So
great. Well, thanks, Charles, for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to add before we say our goodbyes?
No, I mean, honestly, it's not a ton of work. I mean, you can do everything that I just talked about in less than 20 or 30 minutes a day. And so if you just get up a little bit early and go do it, I can't tell you what a difference it'll make in your career. I mean, people just rocket ahead because they're talking to the right people. They're learning something new. They're committing code and they're showing people what they're capable of. And once you've done that, you're not a risky hire and people will offer you what you're worth.
Yeah. Great. All right, everybody. Thanks again, Chuck, for coming on. Thanks for listening, and hope to see you next time.
Max out, everybody.